Hello. So today we're going to make some fabric fishes. Okay, so we're going to make some maybe with tails like this or maybe with tails like this. So what you're going to need is some paper to make a pattern. Now you could use just typing paper. If you haven't got any paper, that's absolutely fine. You could use newspaper or sort of magazine paper to push, something sort of around about A4 size that you can cut up. Okay, so you're going to need paper, scissors, some fabric, various fabrics depending on what colours you want your fish. If you have some ribbon or some string, and hopefully some buttons for some eyes. Okay, so once you've gathered all those things together, then we can start. What you're going to do first is you're going to make your paper pattern. Okay, so you've got your piece of paper. What you're going to do is you're going to make your pattern first. So the easiest way to sort of get a symmetrical fish is to sort of fold your piece of paper in half. It's just a normal piece of A4, and then you can sort of sketch your shape, etc., onto there. So if you want a sort of a bigger tail, you can go like that. If you want a tail that is a bit more like that, then you would sort of make an angle there. So your first thing to do is to sort of get your pieces of paper, and also it depends what size. It's entirely up to you what size fish you want to make. Okay, so you're going to sort of draw it on here, whatever size, or if you're going to make multiple different styles of fish, then you can do that, and then you're going to cut it out. So then you're left with your pattern piece, which should be, in theory, symmetrical on both sides. Okay, so with my fish, what I've done is on the nose part is a different colour, so that you can sort of combine two different types of fabric, contrasting fabrics really, and you can play around with it, see what you think you like, play around with it before then you cut it, because obviously this bit is much smaller, and also it depends how much fabric you've got of one colourway and the other. So once you've decided what you want to do, you can get your fabric. So for this one I have some dolphin ones, and we're going to do a little bit of pattern. So we've done a little bit of pattern making, now it's the pattern placement. So if you were having this on a dressmaking pattern, it would have a sort of straight line and a little arrow at each end, and that would denote that the pattern piece would need to be on the fold. Now, ideally you would sort of press it so that you've got a nice crisp finish. Okay, so try and make sure that you don't waste too much fabric. Now at this point you can decide, do I want a different sort of nose cone, and then you can decide where you want it. So the best thing to do is, if you're going to do it with this one, is to, not using your fabric scissors, is to cut it. Okay, and to cut the piece of the nose cone size that you want. So if I say going to go there, so that means then that we have a pattern piece that we're going to cut two of on a different fabric. Okay, and it helps if you do it straight, but anyway, so if you have some pins, that's great, or you could just peg it onto the edge, or indeed you could turn it inside out and you could draw around in pencil, but if we're sort of using it like a pattern piece, then we're going to just put a few pins in, and we're going to cut round after that. So again, you don't necessarily need specific fabric scissors, you need something that will cut fabric when you're doing it. Okay, so you're going to cut round it, making sure you don't sort of cut the pins. And it's best to do it on a flat surface. Alright, so there is your one sort of starter fish, and then we're going to do cut out the nose cone for you as well. Okay, so we've cut out our pieces, and then we cut out our triangular pieces for the nose. And the first job to do is to, well, I press them first, and then to join the nose part to the body. So you can use a machine for this. If you've got a machine, it's just literally a straight stitch, probably about size 3, to do it. And obviously you reverse at the beginning and you reverse at the end just to secure it. You do that for both sides. What I forgot to say was also that you need to cut 2 of each. So you've got 2 bodies and 2 noses. Okay, so your next part is going to be actually making sure that everything is in line, and you're going to sort of sew. So I've pressed those seams flat there. Don't worry too much about the, as long as your stitching is straight, because obviously that's going to be inside. Now, you didn't have to use a machine for that. You can hand sew. Okay, so what I'm going to do today is to just show you a little bit of back stitch. So if you've got your needle and you need some thread, and you're going to tie a knot in the thread, don't know if you can see that. Okay, and the idea is that we sew all around the fish, but we do leave a gap so that we can turn it inside out, and we can also stuff it. Okay, so usually sort of round about the back. You could sort of do it at the fin end, but then that's the tail fin end, but it's quite difficult to get all the way back up to there. So usually sort of round about there might be useful. So we're going to start around about here. And the thing with hand sewing is you sort of go backwards. Just make those, show those seams. What you can do is just put a little pin in, or a little peg, just to make sure that it stays in position, because that is the sort of the most important point. Although you can put a little rick-rack across the join as well, so that sort of covers a multitude of problems. Okay, so we're going to start our hand sewing. So we've got a sort of thread that isn't going to look too conspicuous on the front. We've got our needle. I haven't got a thimble. Just be very careful, and if children do it, please make sure that you sit with them so that they can make sure that that's safe. Okay, because needles are sharp. So you're going to go in to the fabric, and you're sort of about 1/4 of an inch from the edge, and you're just going to sort of pull gently. So that is your first stitch. Now with back stitch, you go back, so you go back to that first entry point, and then you come out a little bit forward of where you were before. Okay, I apologise for my nails. I'm not very good with my nails, I'm afraid, and close work doesn't help. Okay, so your back stitch goes back to that first point and then comes a little bit forward. I think this needle is a little bit too big for this, but anyway, it will give you the idea. So I am doing it a little bit bigger than I would normally do it, so you can see what is happening. So you go back and you come forward a little bit in front. Can you see? In fact, it would help if I get it close to where it was. So can you see? And then you pull it through. All right, and then your next stitch is going to go back to this one. So your back stitch on the back, it looks a little bit more scruffy than on the front, but it is a strong stitch. So if you're doing anything by hand, which a lot of people do, and it is very relaxing, and a lot of quilt work is all done by hand, then back stitch is a good strong stitch to do. Okay, yeah, maybe not those bits, that bit. So yeah, make sure, because I'm trying to sort of see what you're seeing as well. I'm sort of missing the points now. So yeah, you go in, make the stitch, then go back to the other one, and then come a little bit forward and go back. So you're going to do that all the way around, so all the way around here. That might need a paler stitch, a paler cotton, all the way around here, around the tail fin. Okay, and we're going to stop about there. That's just my cat. Okay, so you're going to have sort of about 2.5 inch gap at which you can turn it. All right, so whether you're going to machine round or whether you're going to hand sew round, that's what we'll do, and then we'll come back together to do the next part. Okay, so we've done that. I did cheat. I sort of did it quickly on the machine just so that I can do it for you. So there's a couple of important points just before you turn it. So you can turn it nicely and have a sharp nose. You cut the sharp bit off of the nose. Don't cut the stitches. Just take the excess material off with your fast scissors that'll cut fabric. Okay, that just means that there's less bulk when it's such a tight corner. You can sort of trim a little bit. The important bits are going to be these curves. Okay, so when you turn it, this bit will not turn very nicely. It will pucker unless you snip it. So it's a similar sort of thing when you're doing dressmaking. If you've got curves, you have to sort of snip them. Okay, so again, making sure you don't snip into the actual stitch. But by doing that on any curve, you will make sure that it will turn nicely. And again, on the corner, we're going to snip that corner. We're going to snip that corner. Make sure you don't do the stitching. And here as well. So where we start to curve, because I've been trying to rush it, my stitching is not the best on here. Okay, might need to do a little bit on there as well. I'll trim it down actually. You can see where I'm trimming, which is what you would do if you were trimming seams. Because it's sort of turning inside out, we don't need to worry too much about zigzagging the edges. Alright, so we've snipped the corners, we've snipped into the curve of the seam. Make sure you do it up here as well. I have, right, okay. I'll just go and turn that and press it. And to try and get the corners out, you might be better sort of using either, you know, a blunt pencil, something like that. So I usually sort of start one end and bring that through. Okay, so we're sort of starting to turn it now. And you can sort of ease it. The thing with, if you do use anything, don't use anything that's too sharp. As I say, especially if children are doing it, or you might need to give them a hand. It is about sort of getting that nose shape right, and then down the other end it's the tail. So as long as your scissors are together, you can do that. Okay, so we're going to sort of turn it out, and I'm just going to press it for you. Okay, so we've just given it a quick press, and you can see now how you know, nicely the curve has come out, and the points are easier to sort of see. It's still a little bit tricky, but you can take a little bit more time than I have. But I say it's these bits that don't come out very well if you don't snip the curves. Right, so stuffing. You can use, if you've got sort of toy stuffing, if you have an old cushion, they're a really good source of, you know, some stuffing, or an old toy even. Then you could do that, or something sort of soft that you could use. Okay, so this is sort of, I think it's from Hobbycraft, this one. All right, so we're just going to take a little bit at a time, and you sort of start putting some in, and the important part is to get sort of the tail and the nose done first. Okay, and try not to sort of overfill it as well. If you overfill it, it becomes almost lumpy. because you're trying to sort of ram it into a small bit, and then it doesn't get right down to the nose end. You can use a sort of small pencil just to sort of ease it down. Okay, but again, you are going to put a little piece of string there, so don't worry too much. And then the tail is the other part. What you could also do with the tail, as I've done with this one, is so this was a similar shape. You can almost just do some back stitching, you know, just to sort of create it so it's a thinner, so you don't get sort of as much stuffing or no stuffing down it, because if it's a tail fin, then some of them don't. Or you can completely stuff it. It's entirely up to you, depending on your shape. Do think when you're doing your pattern though that you do lose quite a lot of the size once you've sort of used between an 1/8 and a 1/4 of an inch seam. It does sort of reduce it in size. If you're doing this for cats, at this point you could get some catnip. I know they sell little sachets in, or if you grow it, I'm not sure quite how you do it. You'd have to look that up. I don't know quite how to do that, whether you have to dry it or not. You can buy the little sachets, and you could possibly just sort of sprinkle some in the wadding, but you'd have to make sure you use proper toy stuffing so it's safe. Okay, be quite amusing for the cat to come with a fish this size. She does actually enjoy her mice that she has, and a lot of them have got the catnip in, so it just gives them something a bit different to play with. And actually you don't do a double take, because some of the mice that I have 2 cats that they have look quite realistic, and sometimes in the morning, you know, she likes to bring you said toy, because she's an indoor cat, she doesn't go out, so because she's a ragdoll, but they do look quite realistic, and you do wonder whether it is a real one that she's sort of found in the house. Okay, which will be horrendous. Okay, so we're starting to sort of get a look there. All right, so if you fill yours, and then we'll come back and I'll just show you how to do the ladder stitch to close up that opening. So see how you feel. You can fill it more if you like. Sometimes if you do, it all clumps together, so just take a little bit of time to do that, and we'll come back and do the closure. Okay, so we've sort of stuffed the end down to the corners and the point of the nose as much as we can, and so now we have this opening which we sort of need to close. Okay, so you can sort of pin if you like. This does have to be hand done, really. You would see it an awful lot. Okay, now if you've got your needle and your thread, okay, so you got a knot in your cotton, and you're going to put it at the base of where we start with our gap. I'm using red so that you can see where the stitches are going, and we're going to use a ladder stitch, so we're going to do a horizontal stitch on this side. Again, I'm going to do it a little bit bigger. If anybody's had a Build-A-Bear, sorry, it's just being able to see at a distance here, that's my eyesight. It's a similar thing. So when you get a Build-A-Bear, they're sort of almost got this ladder stitch at the back that's pre-done, and you fill it with your stuffing, and you can put hearts. I love Build-A-Bear, but you can put sounds in, all sorts of things. But then at the back, how they do them up, because they're all sort of pre-done, is they do have sort of this string, this stronger string, so it's different for a teddy bear, but it's done in this sort of ladder, and if you go in, you can sort of and have one made, you watch them and they pull it tight, and it miraculously all comes together. It's brilliant. Highly recommend it. Adults or children. And I do like the sea theme. You know, you could almost do some starfish, or a whale, or you know, something similar along that line. You can have with your nautical theme. And you can have them as hanging things, or you could, you know, do your shapes. I mean, a beach hut would be a brilliant shape to do as an applique, you know, to add to a cushion. So we could always look at something like that for a craft share if you're interested. So you can see now how it's making that sort of pattern of those ladders going across, and you think, oh my goodness, that's going to be horrendous. But hopefully when you pull it gently, it all comes together, so you can't see it at all. So you could just sort of trim those bits. So you would carry on, just finish that last bit. So even though I've done it in the red, you can't actually, well, you can tiny bit just at the beginning, you can't actually really see. I'll just show you the end bit. So you'll carry on, which side were we on? That one. And so this bit is best done by hand so that you can see what you're doing, and it's trying to make it invisible as well. If you do it on a machine, it's very difficult to get the bulk under the foot when you've stuffed something, and you know, you're going to see it whether it's a similar stitch or not. It flattens it out, whereas this sort of is in the shape of the animal still. All right, so you get to the end. All right, I think we'll finish there. We'll just pull that bit tight. It's magic. Okay, brilliant. And I can just trim these bits off. They've just got a little bit stuck in there. So so that was ladder stitch. You've done back stitch if you've done all the way around in back stitch, which is really good. So you've learnt 2 stitches there. Just to sort of tighten a knot, I just go back through one of the stitches and through the loop. Okay, make sure that's tight, and then I actually sort of push the needle in and bring it out somewhere where I can feel it's going. Don't lose it in the middle, so you'll have to undo it all and find it all. So if you do that, then the end of your cotton is going to be in the stuffing, so there's no worry of it coming undone. Okay, so we're getting there now. So your next thing to choose is your eye. So raid somebody's collection of buttons, or if shirts are really good, tops, you know, every sort of top you seem to get has spare buttons and sequins, if you know, or beads if it's a beaded top. Have a look, keep them, you know, you never know with these things when you might need them. So it might be you're sort of going to match one with the colourings of your fish. All right, so a button, I mean, if you really want to cheat, you could glue it on, because I'm going to show you how to glue some rickrack on as well. So if you're doing your button is fairly easy. You're going to put the knot behind it and come up and go around as much as you can. At the end, you sort of wrap it around and do your little knot through there. I can show people how to do that as well, but I just thought most people would be able to do that one, so I'll not take up more of your time. So we're getting there with our fish. You could do one on one side, one on the other, and then we're getting towards being able to have our fish with some, and I found some rickrack tape which I really like, so I will get that and we'll glue that on. Okay, if you want to glue it on, then you can use a cool melt gun. If you're using a hot glue gun, make sure you're very careful. This is a cool melt one so that it doesn't hurt my fingers. So if we're going to want to cheat, we can just put a dab of glue and glue that eye on if you really want. If you're doing it with a hot glue gun, please make sure that you prod it on with something, as it does hurt. Okay, and then I found this rickrack tape which I thought might look quite nice on the fish. So if you sort of decide which you think is going to be the underside, I would start sort of on the seam. Oh, sorry, on the seam, just a dab of glue there. And you do have to work fairly quickly with this. So secure it, and then really we're wanting it to cover this seam, aren't we? So I would sort of go along there. to be fair, rickrac's fairly easy to sew on as well. You can just sort of sew it on the edge, but just if you want, is an alternative. So I just like to show people the alternative of doing things. Not everybody wants to sew all the time, but they'd like to do a little bit, and that's fine, because it just sort of, if you do too much, then you get fed up of it. So it's doing little bits that you like and you feel comfortable with. That's the thing I always think. And if you don't enjoy a craft, there's absolutely no point. Okay, when you get to the end, you will have to be careful with it, because you're going to sort of almost have to find a matching point. So I've sort of got a matching point there. So what I'll do is I'll trim here so that then the underneath bit will carry on, you see. So you're sort of making sure that it doesn't show anything. All right, so I'll just do these little bits and then show you the final result. So once you've put the buttons on and some ribbon, again, clothes are quite good. Have the hanging ribbon. So if you've got any collections of that, or a box of chocolates, something like that, little bits of ribbon that you keep or packaging, that's quite good. This is just, it's a bit like that Christmas string that you can get to tie up your parcels. So you can just sort of do a bow and actually sew it on. I just sewed that on very small to the end of the nose, and then you can sort of graduate the length they are to hang. So I think it's quite nice to have coordinated ones. I've tended to go all blues there, but you know, alternate the noses and the tails and things like that. You can, when you get more confident, you can include the string when you're sort of sewing in, if you do it on the inside. But have fun, that's the thing. When you're starting to craft, it's just about experimenting, having fun, enjoying while you're doing it, and yeah, just making some things either to give away or to hang up, I think is a nice idea. I hope you've enjoyed it. I would love to see how you do your makes, and I will speak to you soon. Don't forget, there's our website, www.thewoodcottagecrafts. There are lots of kits and fat quarters on there, so if you want to have some fabric to do it, then please go on to there. There are also some good craft kits as well, but you can always email me for any advice. That's thewoodcottagecrafts@gmail.com. Lovely to see you. See you next time. Bye.